Well, folks, we did it again. We overrated some Hearthstone cards. Man, it's tough, right? You think 7-mana cards are playable, but not in this Hearthstone meta. So we're gonna go through the most overrated cards in this expansion. Basically, that means cards that were highly rated by the community or myself, but in reality aren't really getting played at all. I'm not gonna bore you with the details on how I determined these 10 cards, but it's a mix of qualitative and quantitative stuff. So use some data to guide them and then kind of shifted the order a little bit based on my judgment of people's perceptions. So that said, let's talk about our number 10 card, if you will. And it's Sheldress Moontree, this glorious bearded idiot. And to break down what these things on the right side of the screen mean. So Sheldress, for instance, was rated 3.7 stars on average by the community. That's based on a couple different community site ratings. But he's only being played in 2.4% of Druid decks. So I wanted to give class-specific played data here to make sure that it's not just a bad class. But even within Druid, he's still not getting played. He's 116th overall for played percentage from Stormwind. So he's in the bottom 20 cards for this expansion, which is just absolutely miserable for any given expansion, right? That's the bottom of the barrel. And then that's pretty self-explanatory. I gave him 3 stars there myself. So this wasn't really one of the most highly rated cards by the community at 3.7 stars. That's in the upper half, pretty firmly in the upper half of cards. And the reason he shows up here is because he's so low on the played win rate that he's something like probably the 50th ranked card, and he's 116th overall for played rate, and that is an enormous difference between expectations and reality. Most of the cards in this video will be over 4 stars, but this guy just failed so hard that he just really did not live up to expectations here, even at 3.7 stars. They were pretty meager expectations, and he still didn't even come close because you've never seen him. He's not even a real card. And of course, at 8 mana, it's just too slow right now. And it's not really just that it's 8 mana. It's 8 mana do nothing most of the time. You need like a follow-up card or a whole nother turn to even get any value out of Sheldress. So it's really a super delayed payoff for this. Will Sheldress ever be good? I mean, there's a possibility if the meta really slows down, power levels decrease, or just some absurdly reactive sort of spell comes up for Druid where if you play this and there's a cheap draw option and it can like really swing a game. Could get there, but I don't see it really. I think this is one of the least likely cards to come out of its weakness right now. He may just get forgotten for his entire standard lifespan. All right, so next up here is Call of the Grave, rated 4.1 stars by the community. It's pretty high for community ratings. You know, as it always goes when you've got a bunch of people rating things, they tend to clump in the middle. You've got that kind of bell curve. So 3.4, 3.5 is kind of the middle range. 4.1's up there. This is one of the more highly rated cards. But that said, only played in 8% of priest decks. Most priest decks right now are the aggro face stuff where this doesn't really fit. And 89th overall for the entire expansion. I did give this one 4 stars myself, pretty close there to the community ratings. I thought the value potential on this would be nice. Priest is a class that cares about value, except right now they don't, because nobody really cares that much about value. Everybody cares about pressure and damage and speed, and this does not fit into that mold. So I think Call of the Grave is a card that does have a decent chance of seeing play eventually. Any kind of Death Rattle synergy list, or if they just need enough mana, this comes into play, possible. Particularly good Death Rattles could also open this up if there's just some great options for like Priest Death Rattles that you hit fairly often. All possibilities for this card to get there, but for now, just not fitting what Priest does, or really even the meta does. Moving on here to Prester Pyromancer for Mage, rated 3.8 stars by the community. So not quite as high as some of the others on this list, but absolutely abysmal played rate. 0.3% of mage decks. Basically none, because most mages aren't running minions at all, or very, very few in some specific cases. And that puts this in the bottom 5 cards of the expansion. 131st overall for played rate. That is absolutely awful. Even worse than Sheldress. And for a 2-mana card, that's a little bit more condemning. I gave this one 3 stars. I thought Prester's made some sense, but not a lot of sense. I think I compared this like Talented Arcanist. Felt like Arcanist was probably better. This has some technical upside on stats, and you can save the spell damage to the next turn, which is maybe useful, but very limited use cases. But in reality, Mage just doesn't need this card because Spell Mage, Quest Mage stuff is where they're going. I think there's a possibility this card gets there once we see the sort of Spell Mage stuff rotate out, or maybe if we get a really dedicated fire list. It's got some upside. I wouldn't totally give up on this card, but I don't think it's exciting enough to really ever be a star of the meta. 3 stars might be this thing's peak, and it hasn't even gotten there yet. It's currently not played at all. Moving on to Ramming Mount. This is some moment of shame for me, I guess. Rated 4 stars by the community. I gave this card 5 stars, which it sounds crazy kind of, but I don't know. I sort of think it's reasonable. I still look at this and I think it's insane. I still think this card is insane. I give it time. It's never going to hit 5 stars, obviously. It's not even really the kind of card I should have given 5 stars because it's not like a build around or meta standout. I just thought it was going to be really good. This is a pretty prototypical 4-star card by my ratings, so probably even a mistake in my ratings, but it happened, right? I did it. But Ramming Mount not being played in Hunter decks, 2.4% of Hunter decks, 106th overall for the expansion. Certainly not a 4-star card. I think people like this one for the same reason I did. It seems like a great way to take some trades on board. We got a lot of rush minions in Hunter. So, you get a little 1/1 hyena on board. You use this to take a trade up. You got a sticky 3/3 stuck behind with a death rattle that gives you another awesome potential minion on board to take another trade. And I mean, maybe in hindsight, we should have realized Hunter's never going to trade. It's like they don't need to trade. So what good is the immune? Maybe attacking into explosive trap, and that's about it. But I thought this is still like potentially face damage. Even when you weren't trading, I thought, oh, it's just going to be, another way to send 2 to face and get a sticky board. So I thought there was upside even there. I still feel like this card's going to be good someday. I think it's just really effective immediate stats. It's 4/4 total stats. It's got this immune upside. It can push extra face damage. There's a lot I like about this one. It's even got spell synergies as well. That's something you want to work with. So I'm not giving up on this. It will never be a 5-star card just because it shouldn't have been a 5-star card. But I think it could still be a 4-star card someday. But for now, it's not even close. Hunter's much, much faster than this card can afford. Alrighty, next up here is Wicker Claw. 3.8 from the community, 3 from myself. Only in 1.3% of Druid decks, though. Yeah, and only 124th overall for Stormwind cards. So basically the bottom 10 there. Just not getting played at all. And I still like this card. I still feel like the 4 attack or 4 health is an awkward amount to deal with. We've seen that sometimes with Octobot and Rogue. Seems like the scaling payoff is quite high as well. I wonder if there's not an attack-based aggro druid that maybe even foregoes Quest that could use this card as just a great way to push damage. But I don't know. Maybe it's just too much investment into a single small minion. There's too much rush stuff out there. Maybe it doesn't scale fast enough. I don't know the answer to this card. It still makes sense to me. The community liked it fairly well, but it's just not even remotely good enough, even though it's a pretty fast card. So this one's a bit of a mind boggler. Moving on here to Provoke for Warrior. A lot of you guys like this card a lot. I gotta say, playing it in Big Warrior felt better than I expected. And it is in 15.2% of Warrior decks, which is basically the Big Warrior decks. But that's because Warrior's not great right now. Right? Warrior is, near the bottom of the meta, basically. You can play some rush stuff. Pirate stuff's kind of playable. Nothing great, though, in Warrior. This is basically people playing big decks that also aren't that great that are accounting for that percentage. 95th overall for Provoke. Clearly not looking great there. I gave this one 3 stars, which actually still a little high for its current numbers. It's looking like a 2-star card at the moment. That said, I think this is definitely a card to keep an eye on. It felt better when I played it than I expected. I don't know if it'll ever be a 4+ star card, but a sort of fringe playable 3-star card I think could happen someday. But for now, it's not even close to that. Maybe partly because of Warrior, but even within Warrior, this is clearly not a card that's standing out. It's not like in half of Warrior decks or something. It's still very much outside the meta. So moving on here to the imported Tarantula, rated 4.1 stars by the community, very high score, and 123rd overall, really far down. But yeah, Tarantula turns out not great, only in 1% of Hunter decks, barely played at all comparative in Stormwind, and it makes sense because, yet again, 5-mana card for Hunter, that's a minion. That's not making sense for Hunter. Hunter wants to go face really hard, or play a ton of spells. This just does not fit the Hunter mold. This is one of those cards though, where it's like, it looks like a dream sort of arena card, or just like, you know, generic value thing. I could see this showing up somewhere down the road in a Death Rattle or sticky Hunter deck, mid-rangey minion Hunter deck. Those may not ever exist, but this card just has a lot of stuff going on. It's tradable. It's solid stats, sticky, really annoying Death Rattle with some high friction removal stuff. I think this will absolutely be a reasonable card. The question is like, everything's so synergistic in Hearthstone these days that these sort of reasonable cards that just seem to have a lot going for them, if they don't fit into that super specific niche slot in a deck, even if they're good and make sense, they still might not get played. So it still feels like a good card to me, but it may just always be not quite good enough for the hyper synergistic lists of Hearthstone today. All right, here we have another Hunter card, actually, Devouring Swarm at 4.4 stars by the community. Super high ratings. This is very near the top of all ratings. I can actually just look maybe if you want. This is like, yeah, top 20 card for ratings, and played 79th overall. Actually does show up in some Hunter decks. I mean, less than 10% though, so still very rare. Now, I only gave this one 3 stars, which I wasn't as excited about this as you guys. I think a lot of people wanted this to be played in like rat decks, but rat decks haven't popped up. It's potentially got some play in spell decks too, as a 0-mana way to refresh your hero power. That's pretty intriguing. That might be the 9.2% of decks that are playing this. I'm not actually sure what's playing it, because I've never seen this played in a Hearthstone game personally. Yeah, it's one of those cards that's like kind of value based, right? Like you're getting minions back to hand, and Hunter doesn't really want to do that too much, right? They don't want to like trade a bunch. They mostly want to go face and hit and let the opponent do the trading. So this goes kind of backwards to what Hunter is all about at the moment. This is a little bit too value, a little bit too defense oriented when Hunter wants to really push and pressure. So you know, when I played this card, it actually felt okay, right? It's like a little cheap kind of removal into more stuff, particularly with rush minions and little hyenas and things. It feels pretty decent. So, you know, keep an eye on it. I don't think this will ever be a 4.4 star card, but is it one of those Friends 3-star cards again? Yeah, maybe. All right, our buddy Bollinger here at number 2. I can't believe it. Bollinger. This is the what's wrong, Bollinger? How are you not playing more, Bollinger? I gave Bollinger 5 stars. I still think he's got the insane 5-star potential. Community gave him 4.7 stars, making Bollinger the 4th highest rated card the entire expansion. Only Canal's Logger, Granite Forgeborn, and Overdraft actually were more rated. All Shaman cards, by the way. Overdraft was close to being on this list, but it's getting played enough that it didn't quite. It was like bottom 14. So Overdraft almost made it. The other two, of course, are great. But yeah, Bollinger, I mean, only in 4% of Shaman decks. I thought more people were like teching this into Elemental Shaman. We did some crazy combo stuff with it on day 1, but it turns out 10 mana combos are pointless when you have, you know, 5 mana combos in every other deck. So Bollinger's just not getting there. I thought he'd have enough just general utility. I thought he'd have combo potential. It seemed like there was going to be some slice of a deck where Bollinger was really good and like deck defining. I think that could still happen, by the way. I think this is absolutely a card that could push to 5 stars. It could live up to these expectations eventually, but for now, but well into the bottom half of the expansion, really in the bottom third of the expansion for Bollinger, just not making the cut for such an exciting and awesome looking card. And then finally, our number 1 card, Shard of the Naru. Man, I got some hate for this card. People are mean to me. I didn't think this was exciting as you guys, and a lot of you told me I was stupid, which is true, but not because of this. You guys gave Shard of the Naru 4.6 stars, making it tied for the 8th most highly rated card in the entire expansion. And a lot of you said, it's a better Mass Dispel. It silences, it also draws you a card. But I kept trying to say, it doesn't do both. People just didn't want to accept that. It does one or the other. It either silences or draws you a card. It doesn't do both at the same time. And once it silences, it can't draw you a card. So, and if you draw a card, you can't silence with it, at least not immediately, right? And it turns out when games are really short, if you trade a card back, you're probably never going to see it again. So right now, Shard of the Naru just doesn't make sense. Beyond that, of course, Priest is not being played as a sort of control deck, but I don't even know if this is going to be good enough once it is. I feel like the controlled priests I've seen still aren't running this. They're happy to discover it on occasion. It's a fine card to discover sometimes, but it's not usually good enough to put into your list. And if you look out across the meta, Silence right now is just not very good. Maybe people were kind of hooked on the like Libram metas of old. There are some Divine Shield things, but Priest can kind of deal with those anyway with just like actual removal cards. So Shard, the Silence just doesn't have a lot of value right now. The combination of the tradable and Silence isn't maybe as good as people were imagining originally, because trading it, you kind of lose one half of it, or playing it, you lose one half of it. And what that means is Shard is a 2-star card at best right now. It's not even a 3-star card. I actually technically still overrated this, even at 3 stars at the moment, because this is just barely inside the top 100 cards of the expansion, despite being rated super, super high. So, yeah, Shard is not that great, but everybody thought it was going to be nuts and told me I was an idiot. So, joke's on you. Joke's on me, though, for ramming Mount. We're all guilty in this. Nobody is innocent here. So the number one most overrated card of the expansion is Shard of the Naru. And there you go. These were the most overrated cards, at least by my metrics. There are some other great options for overrated cards, depending on how you break down the data and what you think. So share your thoughts. Which ones did you get right? Which ones were you crazy wrong about? Which card did you personally overrate? What do you think should have been on this list? Actually, if we had more time, Cornelius Rome probably would have been on this list. He's a card that's rapidly falling out of the meta and was rated pretty darn highly by folks who thought he was going to be nuts. So if we had another week or two, you might have seen Rome on here with more data, but he's still kind of clinging to some of those Paladin lists and stuff. So anyway, share your thoughts. Tell me I'm an idiot, because it's true. Tell other people you're really smart, because it might be true. I want to hear all that in the comments below. But thanks much for watching. Stay tuned for the most underrated cards of the expansion in the near future. And until next time, game on.